The year was 1986. The summer sun beat down on the crowded platform. A young man, barely out of his teens, stepped off the train. His name was Arif. He clutched a worn suitcase, his heart pounding with a mix of trepidation and excitement. Lahore. The city of his dreams, the city of his parents' dreams. Arif was here to study at the university, to escape the confines of his small village, to embrace a future full of promise. A wave of heat, thick and suffocating, washed over him. The air was thick with the scent of diesel, dust, and something unfamiliar, something distinctly Lahore. A cacophony of sounds, car horns blaring, vendors hawking their wares, the chatter of countless voices enveloped him. Arif took a deep breath, steeling himself. This was it, his new beginning. Arif's uncle had warned him about the challenges of finding accommodation. University dorms were limited, and private rooms in decent localities were expensive. Arif knew his family couldn't afford such luxuries. He had saved every rupee from his tutoring jobs, but it was a meager sum. Finding a place to live was his first challenge. He was determined to succeed. Arif's gaze swept across the crowd, searching for a familiar face, a friendly smile. He saw none. He was alone, adrift in the sea of humanity. He hoisted his suitcase onto his shoulder and plunged into the city. The days turned into nights. Arif trudged from one neighborhood to another, his throat parched, his feet blistered. He explored dingy boarding houses with peeling paint and cramped rooms. He inquired at hostels buzzing with students, only to be met with shrugs and house-full signs. The city, once a shimmering mirage of hope, now felt like a labyrinth of disappointment. One evening, exhausted and disheartened, Arif stumbled upon a small lane tucked away from the main road. The air here was slightly cooler, carrying the sweet scent of jasmine and a hint of something industrial. He noticed a faded signboard, Iqbal Hostel, reasonable rates, a beacon of hope in the fading light. The hostel was a two-story building, its once bright paint now faded and chipped. The courtyard, though small, held a certain charm. A large neem tree provided ample shade, its branches heavy with fragrant blossoms. A group of men sat on charpoys under the tree, sipping tea and chatting animatedly. They looked up as Arif approached, their faces curious. The hostel manager, a portly man with a handlebar moustache, listened patiently to Arif's predicament. A flicker of sympathy softened his eyes. He led Arif to a small room on the first floor. It was sparsely furnished, but clean and airy. A single window overlooked the street below. It wasn't much, but it was a roof over his head, a place to call home. Relief washed over Arif. He could manage this. He could make this work. The Iqbal Hostel was a microcosm of Lahori life. Students, labourers and dreamers from all over Pakistan found temporary refuge within its walls. Arif soon settled into a routine, his days spent navigating the crowded buses to the university and back. He spent his evenings studying under the watchful gaze of the neem tree, the murmur of conversations, a comforting background hum. The hostel's location, while not the most glamorous, had its perks. It was situated near a sprawling Pepsi factory. The air, especially at night, was infused with the sweet, syrupy aroma of cola. Across the street, sandwiched between a tea stall and a bicycle repair shop, was a small PCO. This was Arif's lifeline to his family, a place from where he could share his hopes, anxieties and triumphs with his family back in the village. The PCO was run by a middle-aged Hindu man named Mr. Chopra and his family. They lived in the cramped quarters behind the shop. Mr. Chopra, with his kind eyes and gentle demeanour, reminded Arif of his grandfather. His wife, Mrs. Chopra, always had a kind word and a ready smile for Arif. Their daughter, Priya, a girl Arif's age, managed the accounts. Priya was a breath of fresh air. Her laughter was infectious. Her eyes sparkled with intelligence and wit. She was studying literature at a local college, her nose always buried in a book when she wasn't managing the PCO's accounts. Arif found himself drawn to her quiet confidence and her passion for stories. They would often talk for hours, sharing their dreams, their fears, and their love for books. As days turned into weeks, Arif's friendship with Priya blossomed. They discovered a shared love for Urdu poetry, spending hours reciting verses by Faiz and Ghalib. Priya introduced Arif to the city's hidden gems, the aromatic spice markets, the vibrant book bazaars, the serene gardens tucked away from the urban chaos. Arif, in turn, shared stories of his village life, the simple joys and quiet rhythms that Priya found both fascinating and foreign. One evening, while returning from the university, Arif came across a group of young men harassing Priya. They were loitering near the PCO, passing lewd comments and blocking her way. Anger surged through Arif. He dropped his bag and confronted the men, his voice shaking but firm. The men, taken aback by Arif's unexpected intervention, backed off with a few muttered threats. That evening, a bond of unspoken understanding formed between Arif and Priya. Mr. and Mrs. Chopra, their eyes filled with gratitude and a hint of worry, insisted that Arif join them for dinner. Over a simple meal of dal, roti, and fragrant rice, Arif learned about the challenges the Chopra family faced as a Hindu minority in a predominantly Muslim country. He listened, his heart heavy, as Mr. Chopra spoke of the subtle discrimination, the occasional threats, the ever-present fear that lingered beneath the surface of their daily lives. The summer of 1986 was unusually harsh. The sun beat down with relentless fury, turning the city into a furnace. The streets were deserted during the day, the air thick with the smell of melting tar and simmering garbage. Even the neem tree outside the hostel seemed to wilt under the oppressive heat. Most of the hostel residents had left for their villages, seeking respite in the cooler climes. The courtyard, once abuzz with activity, was now eerily silent. Only a handful of students, including Arif, remained, driven by their academic pursuits and the lack of alternative accommodation. The oppressive heat seemed to amplify the tension that had gripped the city. The conflict with India over Kashmir was escalating. Rumors of war, like whispers of a coming storm, circulated through the streets. The radio crackled with news of border skirmishes, of troop movements, of escalating rhetoric from both sides. Despite the growing unease, life at the hostel continued at its own languid pace. The oppressive heat seemed to have lulled everyone into a state of inertia. Arif spent his days studying, escaping the suffocating heat in the cool sanctuary of the university library. In the evenings, he would sit with Priya at the PCO, sharing stories, anxieties, and stolen moments of laughter. One stifling afternoon, a strange sound broke the silence of the hostel, a low rumble, distant yet distinct, like the growl of a caged beast. Arif, absorbed in his studies, barely noticed it at first. But as the rumble grew louder, shaking the floor beneath his feet, he felt a prickle of unease. He went to the window, his gaze drawn to the street below. The few people who were out and about seemed equally perplexed, their faces etched with confusion and a growing sense of alarm. The rumble was now a steady drone vibrating through the air, through the very bones of the city. Downstairs in the courtyard, the remaining hostel residents had gathered, their faces etched with anxiety. The air was thick with speculation. Some dismissed the sound as a passing truck, its engine straining under the weight of its cargo. Others, their voices hushed with fear, whispered of troop movements, of tanks, of war. Arif's gaze met Priya's, her eyes wide with alarm. He saw the fear reflected in her eyes, the unspoken question hanging in the air between them. He didn't have an answer, not yet, but a sense of foreboding, a cold knot of dread settled in the pit of his stomach. Something was wrong, something was very wrong.